Hi guys, welcome. My name is Juan Pablo Giron, and today I will be talking to you about performance, recovery, and resilience. And in order to better help you understand these topics, I'm going to be using a car metaphor. But before we get into the subject, I want to give you a little information about myself. I am a personal trainer outside the Philadelphia area, and I quit my job about 8 months ago in order to dedicate my time into personal training and helping people with their goals. And throughout this time, I've learned a lot about performance, recovery, and resilience, and what that means in terms of being an athlete, but also what that means in terms of just being a human being, right? Someone who goes through their day to day basis, day to day life. Um, and so I want to start off with defining what health means. And I think it's important to be on the same page about this. So, health for me is the ability of our bodies to regulate our internal systems in order to adapt to the external world, right? Or the external environment. And now we can talk about performance. So when we talk about performance and we talk about performance in terms of Usain Bolt, who's pictured here next to his world record of 9.58 seconds for the 100-meter dash, I want to ask you, what does that look like in terms for him? I think that a lot of you would argue that there has to be some sort of result attached to performance, right? Or else how would we be able to indicate whether it's a good performance or a bad performance? But now, if we take a look at three populations, let's say we have a CEO, a parent, and a sales agent. Their performance looks very different. Why? Because performance is very task oriented, right? So, performance for a CEO looks very different from a parent. But they all have one thing in common, and that is recovery. They have to be able to recover just enough in order to repeat that task over and over again, right? And so the point here is that performance isn't just about power, right? It's about the control between being able to turn it on and turn it off. So now we're going to talk about a car and how that relates to the human body. So let's say you're on the highway, you're driving a car, and I'm asking you, what are three things that dictate the performance of that car? I think most of us would say, well, the human being driving the car has to have some sort of skill. But for now, let's just push them to the side and let's talk about the car. So for me, there's three things. There's the brake, the gas, and the engine. Now, the engine is important, right? It dictates how fast the car can go, etc. But for right now, let's just put that aside and let's focus on the gas and the brakes. So every single car in this world needs both a gas pedal and a brake. I think we can all agree on that. The gas pedal. The gas pedal symbolizes the drive. If we look at Usain Bolt and what his life looks like, his drive is going to be, let me just be better than I was yesterday. And let me try to smash that record again, over and over again, right? That's what wakes him up. That's what keeps him going. But if Usain holds that gas pedal for too long, what's going to happen? Well, I don't know if you've ever been in an overheating car, but you're going to start seeing smoke come up the hood. And that is going to force you to pull over. And when you pull over, you're going to have to wait until the car comes back, it cools down, and then you can keep going, right? So it's kind of like the car's safety system saying, I can't go anymore. Now let's look at the brake pedal. The brake pedal symbolizes the recovery, right? If we don't make use of that brake pedal and we just keep hitting the gas, then again, it's going to happen again. That overheating is going to come out. And at the end of the day, it's going to force us to take that risk. Think about when you're sick, right? When you're sick, all you want to do is just lay in bed. You don't care about anything else, right? That's your body saying, hold on, we've got an issue. We've got to take it easy. I'm going to pull you over and let's get right first before we go attack the day, right? So what if I told you that, our body has the signal that shows us how well these pedals work together? And this is where HRV comes in. HRV stands for heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is the measurement of the beat to beat intervals of your heart rate, or that R to R interval. So a lot of people have this misconception that the heart rate acts just like a metronome. So every second on the second, there's a heart rate. But that's very wrong, because if there was no variability between those heart rates, then that means we would not be able to adapt around the world around us, and COVID would have taken us all out, right? So heart rate variability, again, is that measurement between beat to beat. Now, the heart rate variability tells us how well we can switch between drive and recovery, right? Now, let me ask you another question. If we take a 20-year-old model Mustang and we line it up with a new model Mustang, which one do you think will break down first if we both push them to exhaustion or full throttle? I think it's safe to say that the 20-year-old model would probably break down first. Why? Because of that wear and tear. Who knows if it's been in accidents and whatnot, right? And that's an important distinction of HRV, that capacity changes over time. So let's say you're walking down the block with your kids, your grandkids, or a friend's kids. All of a sudden, they just start sprinting out of nowhere. That's a great indication of HRV because they can just do it like that, right? They have that ability to turn it on. Now, let's say if you were about to do that, and let's just assume you have no fitness and you haven't been working out or anything, whatever, chances are you're probably going to pull a hamstring if you try doing that, right? And that again signifies how HRV works, right? That capacity just changes over time. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, so I have a gas pedal and a brake pedal. What really governs that in my body? Well, that's going to be your nervous system. And in order to understand your nervous system, you have to understand what the central nervous system is and what the peripheral nervous system is. So the central nervous system is just your motherboard. It's going to be your brain and your spinal cord. That's where all the messaging goes through. And the peripheral nervous system is going to be everything else. So it's going to be all of the nerves that run through your body. Think of it as like a highway of nerves that communicate between the brain and the spinal cord, right? That peripheral system is then divided again into two. We have the autonomic and the somatic. The somatic is everything that's kind of voluntary control. So we have motor output and sensory input. What does that mean? Motor output. If I were to say, hey, can you bring me that glass of water and put it on my desk? You'd be like, okay, you get up, you go get it, grab it, put it down. There it is. That's motor output, right? We control what we do. Then we have sensory input. Let's just say that, I'm just going to punch you in the face. You'd be like, oh my God, that hurt. I hope. That sensory input is just your senses, right? Think about going to a restaurant, smelling something that smells good. You'd be like, it smells delicious. That somatic part is voluntary. Now let's talk about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is split into the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, being your brake and your gas. The sympathetic system is really easy to engage, right? If we think about being at Yosemite National Park and being in front of a bear, right? Chances are your heart rate's going to go up, your breathing's going to go up, and you're going to have to make a decision really quick. That's the sympathetic system, right? The fight or flight. Then we have the parasympathetic system, and this is where HRV is a little bit more related. The parasympathetic system is everything from rest to digest. So if we look at digestion, when we digest our food, right, we need specific times to be able to do that. Our body can't be on alert when it does that. And so we want to talk about the parasympathetic system, right? When we think of that, we think of recovery. And I always tell my clients that you can only train as hard as you recover. And that's why I think that recovery is a performance skill, because it enhances overall performance and resilience. It's very important to do. So now you're probably thinking, okay, so now we have a brake pedal, it's recovery. How do we engage in that? Well, there's a nerve in your body called the vagus nerve, and it's called vagus from the Latin word vagus, meaning wandering. So it goes from your ears into your neck, into your pulmonary system, your heart, a couple of organs, and your reproductive system. It's the longest nerve that we have. And this nerve is essential to understanding how recovery influences overall performance and resilience. And so now you're probably thinking, okay, so how do I improve that vagus nerve, what we call the vagal tone? Well, the vagal nerve has a main question. And the question is, are we safe enough to start acting on these recovery things like digestion and all those other things? And when it does, then it activates those things, right? Think about when you're at home hanging out and you're safe, right? Your vagal tone is probably pretty high because it knows that you're safe and it can start doing what it needs to do. And we don't influence it directly, but we do have an influence over it. So think about your lifestyle choices, your habits. All of those things play such a crucial role in enhancing that vagal tone and just overall regulation. And with that, there's 4 core pillars. We have nutrition, we have breath and mindfulness, exercise, and sleep. It's a very holistic health approach. So nutrition. Nutrition fuels that performance that we need, right? In order to think, in order to walk, in order to exercise. It is vital. Then we have breath. I always tell my clients, your breath controls your mind, right? If we're doing a tough exercise and you're breathing really hard, then your brain is thinking, we are in danger. We got to get out of here ASAP. That's the case sometimes. But when you're able to take that breath and just reduce it and just control it, that starts enhancing a little bit more recovery. Exercise. When we think of exercise and we look at a couple hundred years ago, when we were hunters and gatherers, exercise was always such a prominent piece of their lives. Why? Not because they wanted to look good or they wanted to pump, more so because they needed it. They needed to rely on it in order to survive and go hunt for their food. So exercise promotes resilience 100%. Lastly, the most important one in my eyes is sleep. Sleep is what recharges our batteries. If we think of our phone and say we don't charge it for the night, the next morning it's not going to work. And yes, of course, you can charge it then and you'll be all right. But unfortunately, our bodies don't work like that. So I want you to think of this as a cascade, right? When we improve the vagal tone through breathing, meditation, or exercise, we improve the autonomic nervous system. When we improve the autonomic nervous system, then our HRV improves. And if our HRV improves over the long term, then it's just a great indication of having a healthy adaptability between stress and recovery. And that leads to overall greater resilience, right? Being able to take on what the world gives you and being able to adapt to it, right? And so earlier on, I talked about the brakes, the engine, and the gas pedal. Let's talk about the engine for a second. A lot of people think that having an amazing engine is what gets you far in life. And to a certain extent, yes. But I also don't want to forget about the brakes and the gas pedal. If we were to choose a car, say we have a Ferrari and say we have a Prius and we're going to have them race, and I'm going to ask you to choose a car. What if I told you that the Ferrari has amazing gas, faulty brakes, and a great engine, and the Prius has great engine, great brakes, well, not great engine, but a good engine, good brakes, and good gas pedal? Which one would you want to be in? I think for most of us, we'd rather be in the Prius, because once we hit a turn, that Ferrari is not going to slow down and it's going to mean trouble, right? So I do think that the engine is important and important to tune and whatnot, but I also think that it's just as important to have that recovery, to have that drive. It's monumental. And with that, I want to thank you guys for sticking around. Again, I want to emphasize the four core pillars: nutrition, breath, physical activity, and sleep. Once we start working on these four pillars, we're going to start seeing changes both physiologically and mentally, right? Obstacles that pop up into our life are no longer going to seem so daunting and impossible to tackle on. And I think that's the beauty of HRV, that once we have that awareness of how our body is responding to the internal things inside of our body, then we have a better idea and we're more informed to make better decisions in our lives, whether that's not reacting to a coworker who sends a faulty email who's kind of rude, or whether that's being in front of a bear and saying, oh my God, I either got to run or I got to go, right? It's those decisions that kind of make the quality of our lives better. And I want to thank you again for sitting through. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to drop a comment. I'll leave my email down below. If you have any questions or if you just want to start a conversation, I enjoy talking about these things. And most importantly, I'd love to hear about your experiences with HRV or with stressors in your life. Again, thanks so much, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.